So today we're talking about faith. Faith is the major prerequisite for the Buddhist path. It's said that faith is like a seed from which everything positive can grow. And if faith is absent, it's though that seed has been burnt, and nothing can grow from it. Patrul Rinpoche said, "Faith is the most precious of all our resources. It brings an inexhaustible supply of virtues like a treasure. It carries us along the path to liberation like a pair of legs and gathers up everything positive for us like a pair of arms." In fact, all of the great masters have extolled the great virtues of faith and the dangers of letting faith go absent. Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche said, "If you have no faith, even following the Buddha himself will not help you." So why would that be? How is faith that important that without it, even a being as magnificent and powerful as the Buddha, as like our own true nature, the Buddha, cannot help us if we don't have faith? That sounds like a pretty important thing to have. His Holiness Penor Rinpoche explains, "The enlightened mind of the Buddhas is free of partiality. So whether you receive their blessings or not depends on the strength of your devotion and your dedication to your practice. For example, the sun always shines in the sky, but it is up to us to go outside and receive its warmth. Whether those blessings enter your being or not depends not on the object of your devotion, but on your own mind. So our capacity to receive the compassion and blessings of our teacher, of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha depends entirely on our own devotion and faith." As Penor Rinpoche said, the sun's rays fall everywhere, but you don't see it if you don't go outside. And the sun is a giant fireball, and its rays fall everywhere on the earth, but it doesn't set anything on fire unless you take a magnifying glass and focus the power of the sun onto some dry grass, and then it will actually spark a flame. Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche says, "In the same way, it is only when focused through the magnifying glass of your faith and devotion that the all-pervading warm rays of the Buddha's compassion can make blessings blaze up in your being like dry grass on fire." So faith is the only way for the blessings of the Buddhas to enter our mind streams. And Patrul Rinpoche tells us, "Absolute unwavering trust, arising from extraordinary faith and devotion, is indispensable." So there's a story that illustrates this nicely that I really like. So once upon a time, there was an old man, a shepherd, and he had a big rough nose. And every summer, he went with his family to a special mountaintop where he raised his sheep and yaks. And many people would pass by his family's tent, and the shepherd would always ask where they were traveling. And they would say, "We're going to see Dodrupchen Rinpoche and receive the transmission of the 3 verses." And year after year, he would ask this, and eventually he thought, maybe I should go visit Dodrupchen Rinpoche and get the transmission of the 3 verses. So he asked one family passing by if he could join them, and they agreed to let him come along. So he left his sheep and yaks behind and went to visit Dodrupchen Rinpoche. And when he got there, he didn't know what to do. He didn't have any questions for the Lama, so he went to the kitchen and was given some food. And he just hung out there in the kitchen. The family went and met with Dodrupchen Rinpoche, and they asked their questions, and Rinpoche answered their questions, and they went home and left the old man behind. The old man stayed on at Dodrupchen Rinpoche's residence for 3 years, just helping out in the kitchen. He became very close with the people that worked in the kitchen, and they fed him, and it became like family. This whole time, he never met Dodrupchen Rinpoche. one day when some visitors came, the people in the kitchen, they asked the old man, "Can you bring Rinpoche some tea?" So for the first time, he entered Rinpoche's room. And when Rinpoche saw him, he exclaimed, oh my, your nose is like a Rudraksha bead." Rudraksha is a type of seed that is it's a very large seed that's very rough. And it looked just like the old man's nose. And so the Lama says, oh my, your nose is like a Rudraksha seed. The old man thought to himself, that's it. I've received the 3-verse transmission. So he returns to his village, and day and night he chants on his prayer beads, oh my, your nose is like a Rudraksha bead. Oh my, your nose is like a Rudraksha bead. Counting the recitations on his prayer beads. And the village people had great faith in him. I mean, he was there with Drupchen Rinpoche for 3 years. He must have accomplished something. He must have learned something. Surely he must have extraordinary qualities by now, right? So whenever the village people, whenever they became sick or had swelling or pain or anything, they went to see this old man. And he would blow on their injuries and they would be cured. He became famous throughout the whole region for his miraculous healing abilities. So one day, Drupchen Rinpoche became very sick. He developed a boil in his throat and he almost choked to death. So all the local doctors tried to treat him, and nothing worked. And one of his students said, oh, there's this old man in the village down below, and he has miraculous healing abilities. Surely he can heal you. And the old man says, who is he? And he says, oh, you should know him. He stayed with you for 3 years. And the Lama's like, 3 years? I don't remember this guy. Well, okay, tell him to come help me. So they send someone to fetch the old man. And the old man says, well, Drupchen Rinpoche gave me the 3-verse transmission. I should go help him. So before the old man arrived, they brought out this very nice cushion for him to sit on. It's a sign of great respect. And as soon as he entered the room, the Lama saw his big, rough nose and remembered him. He said, this guy, how is he going to help me? So slowly, with one point of concentration, the old man begins to chant, oh my, your nose is like a Rudraksha bead. Oh my, your nose is like a Rudraksha bead. And the Lama just started laughing, and the boil in his throat broke open, and he was cured. So that is an example of the power of faith. So there are 3 types of faith. No, don't go chanting, oh my, your nose like your Rudraksha bead. That's not the point. So there are 3 types of faith. Vivid faith, or awe, is the kind of faith that's inspired in us when we think of the immense compassion of the Buddhas and the great teachers. Maybe you think of the Dalai Lama and it inspires, it just really inspires awe in you that this being is devoting his entire life to trying to bring world peace, and he's so compassionate all the time. And just thinking of him, you feel a sense of awe or faith. Or when you meet a teacher, or you hear the scriptures, you hear some Dharma teachings, or you learn of the extraordinary qualities of the Buddhas. You maybe read the life stories of some great masters, and a vivid feeling of joy arises in your mind as you discover that these beings exist, that it is possible to live in this way. A great vivid feeling of joy arises in your mind. So I once met a girl at a wedding who told me about her first experience reading the Dharma. She went to a friend's house and they had a coffee table book of the Buddhist teachings. And she just opened it to a page and she read one verse, and she said it was like being in a desert and finding sweet, cool water. So that is an example of vivid faith. According to Chagdud Tulku Rinpoche, that first element of faith is inborn. So you either feel it or you don't. But the second two types of faith, longing and devotion, can be consciously increased. And they actually have to be consciously increased. We have to work on developing our faith. In the Vajrayana Buddhist tradition, we aren't expected or even encouraged to have blind faith. True faith arises only when we've heard the teachings, applied them to our daily lives, truly assimilated them until we ourselves experience the infallible truth. So the second type of faith, longing or eager faith, comes after we learn a little bit more. So when you learn about the sufferings of the beings in the lower realms, and you wish to be free of that suffering, you wish for all beings to be free of that suffering. When you hear about the happiness of the higher realms, and especially of liberation, and you wish to attain liberation, you wish for others to attain liberation and have happiness. You understand that this suffering exists, and you understand that this happiness exists, and you start to understand cause and effect and how you create the causes for happiness and how you create the causes for suffering. And when you start to understand how positive actions create happiness and how negative actions create unhappiness, you become eager to avoid negative actions. You understand the harm they cause. And you become eager to engage in positive actions because you understand that that is how you create happiness in your life. So that eagerness to develop spiritual qualities, that eagerness to apply what you're learning to your life is eager faith. And the third type of faith is confident faith. So as you reflect on the teachings and as you practice them and you assimilate them into your life, you develop complete confidence in their truth. So you start seeing for yourself that, if I help others, I'll be happy. Well, try it. That's good in theory. You try it, and then you see it turns out to be true. You really are happier when you help others. Okay, that's true. You develop confidence in that truth. You understand the law of cause and effect and the importance of living in accord with it. You're totally free from doubt. That is confident faith. You're no longer doubting whether this works or not. Patrul Rinpoche says, confident faith is the faith in the three jewels that arises from the depth of our hearts once we understand their extraordinary qualities and the power of their blessings. It is the total trust in the three jewels alone that comes from the knowledge that they are the only unfailing refuge, always and in all circumstances, whether we are happy, sad, in pain, ill, living, or dead. So how do you develop faith? Clearly, faith is very important. It's the only way for the Buddha's blessings to enter our mind stream, so we have to develop faith if we're going to progress on our spiritual path. And though the first type of faith, awe, comes naturally, the second two we have to really work on. We have to consciously increase them by learning about the teachings, by questioning and investigating those teachings for ourselves to deepen our understanding, and to put the teachings into practice in our daily life. Buddha Shakyamuni said, just as a goldsmith would test his gold by burning, cutting, and rubbing it, so you must examine my words and accept them, but not merely out of reverence for me. So that's not something we hear a lot, not merely out of reverence for me. In many cases, many people are raised to believe that we should just accept religious truths because we're told to. This is the way it is. It says it in this book. Just accept it. But on the Buddhist path, that's not enough. We truly have to investigate this for ourselves and prove to ourselves that this is true. Because of these cultural ideas that we might have, because of the way we might be raised thinking that the religious truths are just handed down to you. You have to accept them. Don't question. It might be, a lot of people believe it's bad to question, religion. That's a sense of, that's faithlessness. And that's not true. It's actually an important part of developing faith. So, Jetsunma says you have to ask yourself, I'm supposed to dedicate my life to practice for the benefit of all sentient beings. Is that a reasonable thing to do? And she says, you've got to get it down to the bare bones level. So let's try it. What are some things we do in Buddhist practice? We meditate, we visualize deities, we pray, we chant mantra, we walk around stupas. Are these reasonable things to do? Is this a reasonable way to spend our time and effort? You might think to yourself, well, Jetsunma says that mantras are power seed syllables, but I don't know that. Do I know that from my personal experience? No. Unless you've had some kind of revelation that a mantra is a power seed syllable, you probably don't know this from your own personal experience. A Rinpoche or another teacher has told you this, or you've heard it from me or another student who has heard it from a Rinpoche or Jetsunma, and so you've heard it from someone who's heard it from someone that this is how it is. And we could all be crazy. So that's not good enough. From your own experience, you don't know that mantras work. You don't know that they do anything. You don't know that visualizing deities work. From your own experience, you don't know that circumambulating a stupa works. Walking around in a circle, how does that help anyone? You don't know from your own direct experience whether this works or not. And if you don't reason this out for yourself, there's going to come a day when you're going to want to, go out in the town or something, and you won't be able to because you'll say, well, I said I would take a prayer shift, and I'm supposed to go chant some funny syllables in another language and visualize this being, I don't even know what it is, and walk around in a circle for a while, and you'll think, am I nuts? Like, why am I doing this? I don't know what any of this means. Are these people all crazy? Why are you spending your time doing this? If you don't investigate for yourself, you won't know why you're doing this, and you won't truly invest your faith in it. So, since Jetsunma says we have to evaluate all this stuff from a bare bones level, we're going to do an exercise today. So we've got some paper and pens here, which are going to be passed out. If you're watching at home, please go grab a paper and pen. You'll have a minute to do it. So on a small caveat, if you have a prayer book sitting on your bench in front of you, just make sure that it's not your writing surface. So you move your prayer books out of the way if you can. All right, everyone have their pen and paper? Okay. All right, so at the top, you're going to write action and result. And then over on the right-hand side, you can do two columns, one for yes or no. You could write crazy and not crazy, ridiculous and not ridiculous, whatever you want to say for that. Reasonable, not reasonable. So then we're going to take one of the basic things. We're going to start with visualization. Is visualization a reasonable thing to do? So Jetsunma says, look at it this way. If I don't visualize, what do I normally do with my mind? You might find that you do chit-chat, white static in your mind. You may find that you do a lot of judgment and observation of phenomena. And if you think it through, you might find out that those very observations are the ones that taint your existence. So let's compare the two. Visualization versus ordinary thought. So what do I do when I'm not visualizing? Maybe if I'm not visualizing, maybe what I normally do in my mind is it goes towards the negative. Maybe I start thinking of all the things that could go wrong. Or maybe I go towards anger or anxiety. Where do those thoughts lead? Does it lead toward depression? Does it lead toward ill health? Does it make you happy? So let's think that through. For myself, I know I spend a lot of time thinking about work. I spend a lot of time worrying and planning ahead about things and ruminating. So for my own personal experience, this ordinary thought, those thoughts lead to, my mind starts feeling really tight and rigid. I feel like I don't have any space in my mind, and I have less patience and empathy for others. So that's a result that I've noticed when I spend time letting my thoughts go the direction they naturally want to go. So take a minute and think about where your thoughts go and how that feels. What does that produce in you? All right, now let's compare that to visualizing. Let's say I visualize Chenrezig. Who is Chenrezig? I don't know if he exists. I haven't met Chenrezig. I haven't gone out to lunch with him. I haven't never met him in person. I don't know who he is. Not for myself, at least, not in person. But I know what he looks like. I'm visualizing him. He's white. He has 4 arms. One of them's holding a mala, and one of them's holding a lotus, and 2 are in prayer position. Okay, I can visualize him. But I haven't seen him with my own eyes. I don't know for myself that he exists. So even if I don't relate to it on that level, I'm still visualizing a being that is supposed to be the embodiment of compassion. Let's say I visualize that a lot. A being that is the embodiment of compassion. What's that going to produce in me? So I know if I think for myself, if I visualize deities, the effect that I can notice is that it reminds me that I want to have a compassionate intention and I want to show up with love in the world. That's what it reminds me of. That's one effect that I notice immediately. So think for yourself what the impact is on your being, on your mind, if you visualize a being that is the embodiment of compassion. And if you're not familiar with the Buddhas, maybe consider a spiritual teacher that you're familiar with, whether that's the Dalai Lama or Jetsunma or His Holiness Penor Rinpoche. If you don't have an experience with the Buddha and you're not familiar with that practice of visualizing, consider that. Okay, so now we've listed out what our ordinary thoughts produce in us and what visualization produces in us. And draw your conclusions from that. Is it reasonable to spend time visualizing instead of spending time on ordinary thought? Does that seem like a reasonable thing to do? So if that answer is yes, then that's a check mark in the yes column. And it's okay if your answer is no. This has to be true. You have to be true to yourself and truly see if this is reasonable to you. Then we're going to look at mantra. So a mantra is like a condensed essence of a prayer. Om Mani Padme Hum is the mantra of Chenrezig, the Buddha of compassion. Mantras are supposed to be power seed syllables. Do I know what that means? Does that make sense to me? Is that reasonable? Maybe I don't really understand what a mantra is, and I can't define it. But I get a good feeling when I do a lot of Om Mani Padme Hum. What if that's just because someone told me that it's a compassionate thought, and so I feel good when I do it? Is this a placebo effect? We can go really paranoid with this, you know? I mean, really, like, investigate where your mind goes. So let's examine that. Let's look at mantra. So even if I'm only getting a good feeling from doing mantra because someone told me it's a compassionate thing to do, and so I feel like I'm a good person when I do it, even if that's it, what does it produce in me? When you say the mantra, when you say Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, what does that produce in you? In contrast, what does your ordinary speech produce in you? What do you normally spend your breath on? Do you yell at others? Do you call them names? I don't call people names to their faces, but if I'm in traffic and someone forgets to use their blinker and cuts me off, I definitely call them names. Is that a good use of my breath? Is that a reasonable thing that will bring me happiness? Is everything you say compassionate? A lot of times we want to fool ourselves and say, well, if I'm saying mantra all the time, I can't tell my family that I love them. That's not true. You can also tell people that you love them. Is that all that you say all the time? Are you always saying, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you? No, probably not. What are you saying? And where does that lead? So we'll take a moment, just reflect for yourself. So these are just my answers. You guys do your own answers. So now that we reflected on that, is it more likely that saying mantras will bring happiness or ordinary speech? Which is a more reasonable thing to do? And consider that for yourself. And if it's a yes, that's a mark in the yes column. Okay, next, let's look at circumambulation. That means walking around in a circle around something sacred. So on a surface level, it might look kind of silly or stupid, or maybe it looks exotic and graceful. Jetsunma says that symbolically, circumambulating a stupa means that your whole life revolves around absolute nature. Is that reasonable to you? Let's say that you think it's reasonable. Symbolism makes sense to you. You understand the value of acting out a symbol. Religions are full of symbols, right? All religions have symbolism. But then maybe you hear a teaching where Jetsunma says it creates a vortex of energy. Is that reasonable to you? Do you think that the human body is an incarnation of something that produces energy through thought? And could that thought be making a vortex? You have to decide if that's reasonable. Maybe you don't know. Maybe you're stalemated. So then let's dig deeper. Let's weigh some practical pros and cons. From a physical point of view, walking around a stupa is not dangerous, and it's not difficult. On a physical level, it's good exercise. You know, it's going on a walk is generally pretty good for our well-being. Exercise has been shown to relieve depression and lower blood pressure, so it's probably okay to walk in a circle. Doesn't seem too risky to try. You know, it's probably okay to try. So maybe you need to spend more time investigating and finding out for yourself what it produces in you, and that's okay. So it's not too risky to try. Then let's think about the opportunity cost. What would we be doing if we weren't walking around a stupa? What are our ordinary actions? Would you be watching Netflix or HBO? Would you be watching kitten videos on YouTube? Or reading a novel? Or checking Facebook? Or deleting your Facebook because it's been hacked? What would you be doing if you weren't doing one of these things? Visualizing or doing mantra or circumambulating a stupa? What other actions would you be doing? Let's say maybe you'd be going out and having a good time somewhere. You would be, if you weren't here praying or walking around a stupa, you would be going out with some friends. So examine those good times. Okay, it made you happy. You were happy when you went out with your friends. Is that still with you? Did that experience stay with you? Did it leave you with anything? What was the result? What happened when the stimulation was gone? Did you have a really fun time and then afterwards you went home and you kind of crashed and maybe the next day you're back to normal, or you're maybe more depressed than you were before, or did it have an impact on you? Maybe it was generally happy experience. Did it bring you ultimate benefit? Did it make you stop suffering? Did it make anyone else stop suffering in any kind of a lasting way? So let's think about that. So once you've listed this out, you think, is it more likely that this spiritual stuff will bring you happiness, or is it more likely that the ordinary stuff will bring you happiness? Which is a more reasonable choice to make? This isn't really a decision you can come to in an afternoon. We're taking a stab at this today, but this is something you should really allow yourself to take the time to think through on your own. And let yourself reason it out without self-hatred or self-judgment. You might find yourself reasoning this through and thinking, well, I don't know, this doesn't make me happy. I don't want to be doing this all the time, like coming here and praying or something. Maybe you're having some resistance to that. Sit with that. Investigate it. Where is that resistance coming from? What are the feelings that these activities are producing in you? Jetsunma said, no one should decide this for you. If it's not reasonable, you should not practice. You should never practice unless it's reasonable to you. You should not practice for any other reason, not for approval, not for love, not for any other reason. It must be your decision. And once you have that decision, you have a foundation that will last you forever. And then all you need is to increase your motivation to practice more frequently. This goes right back to what the Buddha said. You must examine my words and accept them, but not merely out of reverence for me. Even those of us who have been around here for a long time, you might discover that you generally think that visualizing and doing mantra are helpful, but maybe you've never really understood what's good about circumambulation. Maybe you've never really understood why that's a good thing to do. And so that's one place where you're just following the crowd. Even those of us who have been here for a while and have generally accepted this as a practice that is good to invest our time in, we might have some blind spots where we don't understand why it is that we do what we do. And it's important to know why we do what we do. Jetsunma says that we should ask ourselves, when I die, what will I take with me? Even if this stuff is all flaco garbage, is it better to spend my life meditating around the idea of compassion than it is to be out in the world, a stimulation junkie? You make a decision based on that, and that decision will nourish you for the rest of your life. It's especially important to do this kind of analysis right from the start. It's kind of like getting in a boat. So before you set sail, you want to check the boat for leaks, check the sails, make sure the captain knows what he's doing, knows how to steer the ship. But once you're in the boat and you're out on the water, it's a little late to be questioning that. So once you've taken refuge and committed yourself to this path, to following a particular teacher and their lineage of teachings, don't waste your time examining whether or not the Buddhist teachings are true or not, whether they have blessings or not. You're in the boat. You're out on the water. At that point, you must turn your magnifying glass towards your own mind and examine how much devotion and pure perception you have, how much doubt and how many wrong concepts you have. And through this process of examination and inner work, you subdue your own mind and you become a suitable vessel for the blessings of the Buddhas. His Holiness Penor Rinpoche said, nowadays scientists examine everything to discover its nature, but there is no physical surgery that can be performed to introduce us to our true nature. If you want an operation to be introduced to your true nature, you must wield the scalpel of faith and devotion and continuously practice without any hesitation or doubt. All right, so we're going to close with a short guided meditation. This is a guided meditation that was written by Jetsunma Akun Lamo, who is the founder and spiritual director of KPC. She's also the first Western woman to be recognized as a reincarnate Tulku in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. And she wrote this a couple decades ago, I believe. This is called the Light Expansion Meditation. So we're going to sit comfortably with your back straight. And just relax, place your hands in your lap, just gently relaxed. And allow yourself to breathe normally. In our tradition, we usually leave the eyes gently open and just rest them somewhere in the space in front of you. Let us become still. Take a deep breath and let it out slowly. Again. Let us center deep within. Center deep within. Deep within to the presence of the Absolute. And there is radiance. The presence of the Absolute increases and expands to embrace the physical body. And all of the physical body is filled with the presence of the Absolute. The presence of the Absolute increases and expands to fill our beings on all dimensions. And all that we are is filled with the radiance of the Absolute. The presence of the Absolute increases and expands to fill everyone here. And everyone here on all dimensions is filled with the presence of the Absolute. The presence of the Absolute increases and expands to embrace this building. And all of this building is filled with the light of the Absolute. The presence of the Absolute increases and expands to embrace this nation. and the government of this nation is filled with the radiance of the Absolute. And the people of this nation are one life. The presence of the Absolute increases and expands to embrace planet Earth. All nations and all governments are filled with the presence of the Absolute. And there is peace. And the 7.4 billion are one life, radiant. The presence of the Absolute increases and expands to fill this galaxy. All planets, all stars, and all life forms are within the embrace of the Absolute. The presence of the Absolute increases and expands to embrace the universe. All dimensions and all kingdoms are filled with the presence of the Absolute. And in all the universe, there is only one life. Now, as we return our consciousness back to physical form, we continue to embrace all that is and to know union, that we are one. Now we'll close with a brief dedication. Dedication seals the practice and enhances its benefits and its results.
Jetsunma isn't in here. But it's on page.
All right, looks like the dedication prayer is not in this one, so we're going to switch to this one now, if you have it.
Page
56.
56. This last one.
By this effort, may all sentient beings be free of suffering. May their minds be filled with the nectar of virtue. In this way, may all causes resulting in suffering be extinguished, and only the light of compassion shine throughout all realms. Thank you for coming today. We have some refreshments out there. If anyone wants some, you can mingle and talk, and we'll go walk in a circle around a stupa later.